Welcome to the School on European Memories podcast. Together, we're going to be focusing on what European memories mean to us from very different perspectives. Let's get into it.
Episode 4, a conversation about fascism and the need to fight against it.
We've all heard the word, we've seen the pictures. Bald men with funny mustaches, two world wars. We know what it's about. Hello, today we're here, Edoardo, Giovanni, Laia, and Darío, and today we're going to be talking about fascism. We're going to be talking about the word, its origin, how it relates to the founding myth of the EU. We're going to be talking about what are some of its characteristics, and also maybe talk about the future of fascism and how we can stop it. But first, a little bit of context. Where does fascism come from? How did the word begin? Well, as you may know, the word was coined in 1919 by Benito Mussolini when he founded his party. And at the beginning, things were very simple. Were you a member of Benito's party? Yeah? Then you were a fascist. However, as other European leaders started following in Benito's steps, things got a bit more complicated. And in order to talk about that, Giovanni is going to be discussing a bit how the Second World War, the Allied victory, and the creation of the European Union, as we know it today, is related to this word.
Okay, so as Darío rightly said, one of the founding myths of the European, Western European actually, and the Western world peace, a new season of democracy after the end of World War II, is actually the victory against fascism and Nazism, often known as the fascists in plural, and the recognition of the devastating effect on society, on European society, but world societies, of fascist crimes and the fascist model of societies, let's say. The Western model of peace and democracy is based on the right assumption that fascism is incompatible with democracy. Okay, so being a fascist and declaring yourself a fascist, founding a fascist party is considered rightly, I would say again, taboo in the Western world, and this label of fascist attaches to all the political forces, all the political messages, all the ideologies that try to challenge the European model of democracy. The term fascist, the label fascist, has a very deep and important meaning, but probably today we will talk about the fact that it also brings some controversies. It has also a controversial meaning. Because as we said, the label fascist can be used to define all those dangerous tendencies that distance themselves from the European and Western European, again, and Western world model of democracy. But at the same time, some regimes that actually have some clear fascist characteristics can avoid this label and can avoid opposition on international level if they do not question the Western model of democracy and the Western model of peace. I think that today we will talk a bit about regimes in Spain and Portugal, the Franco regime and Salazar regime, that for a long period after the end of World War II, I think we can even say 30 years. Yeah, 40 years almost. Okay. They kept living in Europe, surrounded by this model of European integration that was going to develop around them, without being openly contested, or maybe mildly contested by the rest of the Western Europe. On the other side, I would like to focus on the fact that probably, and that's because of this that I focus on the term Western Europe, parts of Eastern Europe, of Central Europe, of Southeastern Europe that free themselves from the Soviet or in general communist model at the beginning of the 90s, probably would see the label fascist in a slightly different way. What do I mean? I mean that in many contexts, the term communist, the label communist, is equalized to the label fascist, and because of course, in some senses, in some societies, maybe not all societies, maybe not to the same intensity of fascism, also the label communism constitutes a political taboo. So, in the Western world, the label fascist, I believe, that's my opinion, might have an absolute meaning, being an absolute taboo. In some other regions of Europe, it might be a very strong taboo, but it can have a more relative, there might be more nuances in this. And I would like to focus, and I will conclude my part, on the fact that nowadays, for instance, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, I think that the use of the label fascist made in Western Europe still prevails in the broader European context. Because I perceive that, for instance, the label fascist used in reference to Putin's regime much more than the label communist. And we could talk about it if you have something.
Thanks so much, Giovanni, for discussing the way that the word fascism and the concept is intertwined with what it means to be European, and also how it varies depending on what region of Europe you come from. And building on what you just said about Putin's aggression in Ukraine, I think it brings up an interesting point, actually, on why we have to be careful with the use we make of the term fascism. And it's because, as you said, the term fascism in Western European democracies has come to mean all that is taboo and that threatens our democracy, right? It's important to be able to have a word that signals a danger to democracy, but it's also important not to lose sight of the fact that not all dangers to democracy come from the same places or are equal. So, for example, with Putin's war in Ukraine, you have Putin, who we would label a fascist, I think, invading another country, Ukraine, with the excuse of denazifying it. And then you have other presidents, like, for example, Giorgia Meloni, who is in many ways the ideological heir of Benito Mussolini, as she herself has claimed, aiding Ukraine. So you have a fascist invading another country in order to denazify it, and that other country receiving help from a fascist leader. So this kind of shows what can happen and how confusing the situation can get when we don't pick our words more carefully, and when we don't discern in what context the term fascist comes in handy. In this respect, we have Edoardo, who's going to talk a bit about what characteristics a fascist regime has and how to identify one.
Thank you, Dario, for the word. Dario, indeed, he talked about the abuse of the word fascism today in our media. Indeed, I want to be a bit pragmatic. I want to say which are the main aspects that can define a party, a person, as fascist. Okay, the first one is the ultranationalism. So the main importance that is given to the ethnic superiority, to the racial superiority, if we want to use a before World War II expression, but that doesn't mean that every type of glorification of ethnic cultural past must be linked to a fascist person. For example, in Italy, there are still a lot of people that glorified the original myth of Roman Empire. But that doesn't mean that they're fascist. But in a public debate, it can be easily abused, the word fascist in that term. Then we have another, of course, aspect, like, for example, the dictatorship, the massive use of violence, the romanticization of violence that was loved by Benito Mussolini and his gang. Of course, we have the cult of the personality that Mussolini, of course, was maybe the real creator in the world of this new type of totalitarianism and a real big leader at the head of the party and of the state, of course. Then we have of course, the militarism, not only talking about war, but to create a world, a state where hierarchies, military hierarchies, military discipline, obedience are the basis form of everything. Okay, so it's obviously links of the anti-communism, everything, and the anti-liberalism, because they're based on the idea that every man is the same, is equal in front of law, in front of the society. But well, in the fascism country, that is not possible. That it's not ideological real. Because of this hierarchy society that's want to bring up. Then we have other aspects that can be considered not at all, not only fascism. For example, first thing that it comes to me to mind is the corporativism of the economy. And the main protectional economy that was even it bring up by Mussolini's and fascismos. Indeed, even today there are a lot of economists and nations that can't be defined fascists, but they follow this type of economy. We will see what Donald Trump is doing in America. Is not a fascism on 100%, because he, of course, doesn't follow other until now the other aspects that I showed to you until now. But they're literally a corporativism and oligarchism. And really a protectional economy. Another thing I want to talk about is the talking with people in a popularism way through conspiracy theory. That was even also a typical way to express himself by Mussolini. Well, today with social network, with on TikTok and of course X, the Elon Musk's social networks, that the conspiracy theory are everywhere in every type of democracy, and it can be defined as fascism if a person believed in some conspiracy theory. The strength of the word fascism can't be minimized if we used it in everywhere, in every context, in every debate. Fascism was created by some aspects, by some way, and talking about fascism in every context minimize his effort. So I can pass the word to Laia.
Thank you. So I think the Democrat has limit, because if a Democrat tolerates the intolerance will destroy our democracy. So I want to do a connect with education, because school aren't just a place to take grammar, mathematics, science. They're a place where students learn how to think, how to live together, of course, Of course, we don't need to teach what to think, but we must how to think critically. So I would like to close with a quote from Paulo Freire, because Paulo Freire said, education doesn't change the world, it changes the people, and people change the world.
And I think with that, we can close this entry on the podcast. Thank you guys so much for adding your thoughts on the word and its use in the word today. And we hope we see you next time.
Idea, recordings and edition, Cesc Mainzer and Fernanda Zamuzi. Music and sounds, freesound.org. All episodes recorded at the Jean Monnet House on May 7, 2025, during the Third School of European Memories.